Why would you want to prime or add primer to a pre-primed canvas? How would you do it? We'll show you that right after this. Hi, I'm Tim Longwell with Longwell Art, where we help you regain your health and happiness through creativity. So why would you want to take a pre-primed canvas and prime it? How would you prime a canvas, whether it was a brand new one or one you had stretched of unprimed canvas? Well, that's what we're going to show you in this video. This particular canvas is a pre-primed canvas, which means it came with 2 or 3 layers of acrylic primer already on it. And sometimes that's enough, depending on what you're doing or what project you're working on. But because of certain circumstances, the weave in the canvas might be something you don't want showing up in your painting. So you're going to need an extra layer to fill in those gaps in the weave of the canvas. And that's the case in the project that I'll be working on here. In order to get this canvas ready, because I have to put text on it, and you're not going to want the canvas showing through the text that's painted on it for this special project, I want a smooth surface. Another example might be if you're painting a portrait. It makes it easier to add details and shading when you're doing portraiture if you've got a smooth surface instead of the semi-rough one that a primed canvas with just enough primer to make the paint adhere, and so that your weave would still show through. Now, there are other ways you could do a portrait, or what I'm doing, but they tend to add up quickly in cost because they're specialty type canvases. So we're just going to show you how to do this, because you never know, you may get one of these pre-primed canvases and not be able to use it because maybe the primer isn't even or whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some gesso. Now you can pick up, when you're just learning, you can get the gesso at Walmart or Hobby Lobby or Amazon, wherever you're most comfortable with. But what you do is you'll dip your brush, and you probably want to use a fairly large brush. This particular one I believe is a 2.5. And that way you can cover your surface quickly. And you always start in the center, and you do small, slow X's. Don't get in a hurry like this, because when you're doing that, you're going to be spraying it on your walls. If you're in a painting class, you're going to be spraying it on your neighbors. You know they're not going to appreciate it. If they're doing the same thing, they're getting it all over you, and then you've got paint in your clothes. So take your time. This isn't a rush project. You just take a light amount of gesso, and you just add the layer, a little bit at a time. Now this particular project, I'm going to want quite a bit of gesso, so I'm going to apply it a little thicker, because we also have to sand this down to smooth it out even more. So bear with me while we speed this up and I finish priming this canvas. And you notice I'm working on getting it fairly smooth, so I'm using more of the side of my brush now. And I'm applying a little bit thicker coat. I'm kind of doing it in layers. And again, I'm putting this on extra thick because of what I'm going to do afterwards to get the texture that I want for this. And this will vary for you too. You can actually build it up in places to where you can add levels of texture, like add height and third dimension to your rocks in a piece of artwork by simply applying enough acrylic in the one spot where you want your rock to take shape, the curve of your rock, the direction it takes, contours and things like that. So there are a lot of reasons that you would custom primer a canvas. And we'll let that dry. And after it dries, then we'll come back and we'll sand it. Okay, so now the canvas is dried. The acrylic primer is ready for sanding. I'm just going to use a sanding block. This particular strip of sandpaper is off of a electric sander actually, but I don't need a lot of pressure, so this just lets me hold it, and this kind of allows a little bit of more flex in the surface of the sandpaper, so I'm not stretching the canvas. And then it can get fairly dusty, so if you've got a vacuum cleaner, and you might want to use that for cleanup to pick up the little fine dust. And you just use little circles is the best way to do it. That way you don't stretch it. You want to just a light touch. And my main concern is the sky area, because that's where the text is going to be on this particular commission. Make sure I go down low enough so that I'm below any potential horizon line. And that's smooth enough for what I want to do with that. Take a brush, and this is where you see the dust you can see popping off. And it's just like sanding the drywall in your house. When you put up a new wall or whatever, where they tape off before you paint, that same fine dust is what you get for this. And now that's smooth enough for the effect for what I want in the underlayer. And that would be it for doing a normal finish for an acrylic painting. But because I'm going to be doing something specific in oil paints, because that's the request, now I've got to add another layer. So in order to do that, I'm going to, because this gesso being acrylic, the linseed oil in the oil paints will be absorbed into the acrylic gesso, and it will then flatten out the oil paints because it'll pull the oils out of the oil paint, and it'll make the painting look flat and dull. So I'm mixing up. What I'm going to use is I'm actually going to use a wet on wet primer. You can use any brand you like. This is just what I have handy. Is the reason I'm using this brand, because the can I bought, that was the size you could buy at the time. And in this case, then you take a brush. In this case, it's a fine natural haired brush. Then you just slowly apply the primer as a base coat. Now this doesn't have to be very thick. It's just got to be a layer enough to absorb. So that little bit that I put on there will go a long way. Because all I'm doing is I'm giving it an oil base for the acrylic primer to absorb, to seal the primer away from the project color paints. See, that's quite a bit of paint on there. So it'll go quite a long ways. And like your gesso, when you're spreading this, if you're doing this, take it nice and slow. Don't get in a hurry. You'll get it all over your clothes, all over your walls, your neighbor, if you're in a class or whatever. So it's just take her easy, take it nice and slow so that you get a good even coverage. so you don't leave any gaps in your, and that's another reason you want to use the X's. It's because it keeps you from getting those gaps. Don't worry about it if you get a little bit of hair in it, in your paintings, because that's normal. The brushes shed. You can just go back and grab them. You can see them, you pluck them off. And that one's being stubborn, which means it's a loose dog hair. Where would we be without our pets, huh? Sometimes it's easier to just let the hair mix if you have to keep fighting it. Just let it mix with your project. You pulling it down. Because remember, this is an oil base, so it's going to stay wet for a long time. So I can pull it down. And I can pull it across. Because I need to get more into this corner. You're just adding enough to check and make sure that you got an even coverage everywhere. Another nice one. It's like I said, it's just natural. It's part of the natural fiber of a brush. You will get that in acrylic brush or synthetic brushes that you'd normally use with acrylics as well. So don't worry about it. Like I said, don't worry about them. There's another one. Just came loose. And just slowly make sure you get a good coverage. And now it's ready for my oil paint project. And as I proceed in this project, I'll show you the different steps and different videos of what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, so that if you ever find yourself doing this in oils or acrylics, there'll be tips you can use for both styles of paints. Hopefully this was helpful for you. You can, like I said earlier, you can use your priming technique and for everything from sculpturing to just filling and making a smooth surface. One tip I might add, but I didn't have any handy, is when you're spreading your gesso, it'll leave less brush lines. Go to your local hardware, Walmart, Lowe's, whatever's handy, and get you some of the 2-inch wide foam brushes. They're just, you've seen them, for wall paint and everything, they're just standard now. They come in a package of several in a package, even 2 or 3 usually. That way, when you put your gesso on, there'll be even less sanding needed. It'll be just enough to just knock off any rough surface area, and your painting will be ready to go if you're using acrylic. And you can do that, start painting right away if you use oil paints. You just will notice a difference in the luster of your paintings by whether or not you apply this coat that I did with this particular wet and wet base. If you found this video helpful, be sure and subscribe down below. As always, there's more tips and tricks over here. How do you prime your canvas? How do you want to paint? Why don't you answer these questions for me in the comments as well? And we'll see you next time as we create for contentment. Meantime, you be sure and have fun.